Hey YouTube. So this is the bike that I modeled mine after. Richard, the gentleman that I met through the magic of the internet, this is his bike. He had it custom made in Toronto or near Toronto. Best Bike Manufacturing or a company similar to that made it for him. Richard's a bit shorter than I am, so his dimensions were significantly different. So I had to do a lot of changes to make my bike work. So I started by designing on paper and measuring my legs and my different measurements, and I put those over to cardboard and made some mock-ups, and then took it out into my garage with some lumber and built a 2x3 mock-up of a bike to try to get my angles and dimensions and everything figured out through that way. This was working out in my garage in the wintertime in Ontario, and so this was around freezing or below freezing when I was trying to work on this, so it made things difficult. Into the house, that green styrofoam is my first attempt. I learned quickly that that foam is no good for this type of work. You can't shape that stuff. It's made with a tiny little styrofoam balls, and it just kind of falls apart as you try to shape and sand it. So I moved to pink styrofoam. This is just some of the materials that I bought. This is a vacuum pump and bagging supplies from ACP Composites in California. A good little product that I got from them. Sample of the West System epoxy and materials that I used. Just a small amount there. I used much more than that, but when I first started I had no idea the quantities that I'd require. This is the carbon fiber and carbon fiber sleeve that I got from Solar Composites. I think they're from New Hampshire. Great company, great products. Really suggest using those. Here's a shot of the pink styrofoam that I started to use, or that I did use throughout the construction for making the components. Shaped it with usually with a hacksaw blade to start, and then sandpaper or sanding screen to shape and smooth it as I went through. That's a piece of PVC pipe and drywall sanding screen that I used to curve the edges of the shaped bike frame. Worked really well. Just here's a the first shot of the roughed out frame before it was smoothed and shaped to my desired end state. It only took a few minutes to make those sort of shapes like that. The hacksaw cuts through that really quickly. And this is a shot of the shaped frame. Thick at the rear on the right side and thin towards the left. That I've learned is a bit of a mistake. I should have made the same dimension all the way from front to back because of the chain lines. But anyway, live and learn. This is a shot of the first vacuum bag, so it's the first layer of carbon fiber sleeve on that bike frame in the vacuum bag with epoxy applied to it. But you can see some wrinkles. First attempt, you got to live and learn. So I did a lot of learning from the first application of carbon fiber. That's the pivot point that I use for the swing arm, made out of the hub of a front tire, grinded off the spoke attachment area there, and it works pretty good. I bought a Rocky Mountain bike as my donor bike for all the components for this, and this is the rear dropout, cut off and sanded down a little bit, roughed up to get attached to my components. So a shot of the rear swing arm there before any carbon's applied, just trying to get the angles and shapes, doing the engineering of it at that point, figuring everything out. And I used plywood to stiffen the ends to make the attachment points for my dropouts. Another shot of the same component as I was figuring things out. Not a lot, there was no computer design or anything for this bike. It was all figured out on the living room floor or in the garage, piece by piece, after I kind of had a visual of what I was going to make. This is the rear swing arm legs in the vacuum bag. I think this was maybe my third or fourth time using the vacuum bag, and things worked out really well. Real nice finish on those. That's that swing arm pivot, which is the hub of a front bicycle tire, wrapped in fiberglass before it's attached to the carbon fiber, so you don't get the reaction between the dissimilar metals. And that's worked out fairly well. And then after it was on like that, I wrapped it with carbon fiber. These are some of the swing arm components. The left four pieces and the right two pieces are the seat, sort of the glides or the slides, I should say, for the seat mount. The initial plan, anyway. That's changed over time. So this is the bike starting to take shape in the living room. Very difficult to try to figure out how I was going to make everything perfectly straight from the front tire to the rear tire. Didn't want anything out of alignment, so you can see string and various contraptions. This took me a couple of days to figure out how to do this before I epoxied anything together. Switched to some angle iron to make things a little bit more stiff than I initially had the plot or the 2x4 lumber holding me straight, but I got that angle iron that helped keep things a lot straighter, and the string to line things up front to back seemed to work out fairly well. Another attempt just to keeping things straight. That's after I had the swing arm pivot epoxied onto the back of the frame there. You can see on the right side. So that's attached, and I'm just lining up for the head tube connection right there to make sure things were straight. Just a close-up shot of the swing arm attachment. It's just at that point it's bonded on there with thickened West System epoxy. And then once it was bonded on, I applied more layers and then started to put some carbon fiber on there to wrap it and strengthen it. That's the rear swing arm, getting the shock mount attached and to stiffen up in the area near the swing arm pivot, where there's a huge amount of force applied there because of the rear shock. That's the stem. I had to use I used an adjustable mountain bike stem from Mountain Equipment Co-op. It's made out of aluminum. I had to cut it because I needed a 90-degree shift from a normal mountain bike handlebar set up to transfer the steering extension rod up to my handlebar. So I had to cut that and rework it. This was a problem. This broke on me when I was in a race. So that's kind of what it looked like. I put an aluminum sleeve on the inside, a small shaft of aluminum, lots of thickened epoxy, some fiberglass, and then a couple of wraps of carbon fiber on the outside, and it wasn't strong enough. A huge amount of force on there from the leverage of the handlebar. And this is when I'm starting to work on the seat, trying to engineer it and figure out the angles and how I was going to build a seat for this thing. It needed back support as well, so that's phase one. This next shot is the final layer of carbon fiber on the bike frame. Instead of in the vacuum bag, as I wanted to get a nice clean smooth finish, I was having trouble with that. I used electrical tape wrapped backwards on this, so sticky side up, to squeeze the epoxy out of the carbon fiber wrap. Worked pretty well. A few ridges that I had to sand down, but it was a fairly good finish. This is working on the seat. I kind of made some frames out of plywood, curved them a little bit, and then I started using cardboard to try to figure out how this was all going to go together. And eventually used balsa wood as the base for this to wrap the carbon fiber on. So this is the balsa wood shaped or cut down into strips so I could curve it. That glow in the dark cardboard in the back was just to help me hold it together before I taped it and put it together. That paper's not part of the construction. Just that's the balsa sitting on the frames of the seat. It worked out fairly well, but the seat turned out to be really uncomfortable. This is the seat with carbon fiber applied. It's a little bit rough in that photo, but it turned out to be a nice seat. It was finished well, but it was just really uncomfortable. I didn't have the angles right, and I had to throw that seat away and make a new one, which I'll show you in a video a little later. This is finally with spring in the air and being able to work outside. Bike's starting to take shape. You can see the seat mount in the back there, and what was going to become the steering tube on there. I didn't know the length at that time, so it's a little long. Showing with the pedals on there now, so I had to use a hole saw to drill a hole in the center of the frame where I was going to put the pedals, and then bond that all together with a lot of thickened epoxy. There was a big clump of epoxy in that center part of the bike where that bottom bracket is. Starting to sit on it, this is when I realized that I needed to adjust how my rear shock was mounted. I didn't have nearly enough travel distance, so I had to move the mounts from the bottom of the swing arm assembly up to the top to give me a more angle to let it travel. Pretty much the finished bike. Instead of having an idler pulley at the chain return, I've only got a piece of PVC conduit there from. This was just because I was running out of time, as I had to race this thing in May, and I had to get it finished. So I didn't have time to finish everything. That's on race day. That's at one of the transitions, or one of the check-in points, I should say, at the Storm the Trent 2011, which is an adventure race in Ontario. A fantastic race, although I didn't finish because that stem of my handlebar broke partway through. There's a shot of the bike up on the roof rack that I built. Since the bike's 8 feet long from front tire to back tire, I needed to modify a roof rack so that it'd sit on top of our little car. Works fairly well, and I get a lot of looks on the street wondering what the heck I'm doing with that thing. That's a ride for my first bike down here in Florida. You can see I finally got an idler pulley on the chain return. Bike's working fairly well, and it's a work in progress. So that's what it looks like right now. Here's a video of me riding the bike down here in Florida. It works fairly well, fairly maneuverable. I'm happy with it. I'm just doing slight modifications to make it better. So here's how my bike looks today. Totally different redesigned seat from how it was originally. I bought a commercial seat bottom from Burley, who's a manufacturer of recumbents and I think bike trailers. And then I built a new back piece. Well, it's two pieces. The main rest and then the actual frame of it that bolts down to this new manufactured piece, the carbon fiber piece where my chain idler goes and my shock mounts to. So that's a whole new, there's two pieces down there that bolts onto the main frame. You can see how that's bolted into there, and the swing arm's still all the same, although it looks different. I did a bunch of auto body work on it to make it a bit more smooth. It was pretty rough, so it's been painted and doesn't have the carbon fiber finish, but it's carbon fiber inside still. And what else has changed? The front derailleur has changed. I initially had one that mounted onto the bottom bracket, and I was having trouble with it slipping around, so I put that new carbon fiber shaft right there into the frame and mounted a traditional front derailleur on. That's about the only changes. Oh yeah, that's right, I added the new steering tube here. Is a carbon fiber shaft that I made with the Solar Composites carbon fiber sleeves. I used a plastic pipe as the mold. Worked out fairly well. I haven't cut it to length yet. I'm waiting for some more rides until I can exactly determine the length that I want it. So here to the front, this is the new stem. Well, it's the same stem that I originally cut and had the aluminum shaft, and it broke on that race that I talked about in the video. So this is the aluminum welded piece. So far it's holding up, but it's still, I think it's still the weakest part of the bike because of the leverage that you get on that handlebar when you're pulling on that as you're climbing a hill or going through some sand or something soft. You pull on that handle, or at least I try not to, but it's inevitable you have to get the power in the pedals. So anyway, that's the bike. It's been working well. So another overall shot there.